The plague of humankind, wrote Thomas Zaz, 20th century psychiatrist and academic, is the fear and rejection of diversity. Monotheism, monarchy, monogamy, and in our age, monomedicine. The belief that there's only one right way to live, only one right way to regulate religious, political, sexual, and medical affairs is the root cause of the greatest threat to humanity. Members of our own species bent on ensuring our salvation, security, and sanity. I wonder if Zaz ever had a conversation with French statesman Charles de Gaulle, who once lamented, "How can you govern a country that has 246 varieties of cheese?" I suppose it all depends on where you're sitting. From some perspectives, diversity is a problem. It's tough to be a successful authoritarian in a diverse country. Though I sympathize much more with Zaz, I'm not unfamiliar with de Gaulle's moaning. Some compare Unitarian Universalist ministry to herding cats, but they're wrong. It's more like living with cats, which I do. You sort of gently suggest something to them, and they either decide to do it, they completely ignore you, or they do the opposite out of spite. And we love one another either way. For someone who thinks only in my way or the highway terms, the diversity present in democratic countries or in UU congregations is a problem. More generally, and pertinent to the political moment in our nation, for those who are feeling left behind by an economy, or who are used to being in charge and aren't anymore, diversity is an easy place to locate fear. People who don't look like me or don't think like I do don't belong here in our country, some say. They are taking what's rightly mine so we can deport them or relegate them to the back of the bus or deny them rights afforded to the majority population. Fear-based. I was in a conversation about this last week, and a person whom I care a lot about said immigrants who come here should be required to learn English so they can assimilate. Then this person started talking about the Pilgrims and how they escaped persecution in England. And I said, hey, there were already people here when the Pilgrims washed up on shore. Why shouldn't the Pilgrims have assimilated? Shouldn't they have learned the languages of the people whose land they were on? My stunning logic did not convince the person. These arguments about diversity are not logical, they are fear-based. There's not enough to go around, let's get rid of people who don't look like me. And of course, fear-based division can come in handy politically. Eleanor Roosevelt warned us of that when she said, pit race against race, religion against religion, prejudice against prejudice, divide and conquer. We must not let that happen here. Now, diversity is not something to be afraid of, though all around us the message is often the opposite. I've come to understand that for some, tolerance is the best they can do. That's the response to diversity that just sort of doesn't fight it. I mean, diversity is just the way it is now. More and more people of color in our country, more and more people from around the world living next door. No use trying to change it, might as well embrace it. I'll tolerate it, folks say, as if there's some choice. But surely we can do better than that. I mean, when we can get out of our fear, the experience of interacting in meaningful ways with people whose life experiences are different from our own enriches all of us. We Unitarian Universalists don't work to embrace diversity because it's inevitable. We seek to embrace diversity because in our diversity, across social class and race and religious preference, theology and philosophy and much more, we human beings are beautiful. Each of us is unique, and we make one another better when we love across those lines. Every now and then, American pop culture really gets a handle on this message and does it pretty well. Are there any Trekkies here this morning? Hey, I knew I could find Trekkies in this crowd. You know then that diversity was a central theme of the original television series. In a time when it was rare to find leading characters of color, Star Trek had Lieutenant Uhura. I'm sure I'm not saying that right. Help me. Is it? Uhura. A black woman in a position of authority. George Takei's Sulu was risky too, a Japanese American as an on-screen hero just 2 decades after the end of World War II. Star Trek's creator, Gene Roddenberry, believed that embracing the gifts of diversity was a deep human need. He said, "If humanity is to survive, we will have learned to take a delight in the essential differences between people and between cultures. We will learn that differences in ideas and attitudes are a delight, part of life's exciting variety, not something to fear." Here's one way to look at it. What would our world be without the gifts that diversity brings us? Neuroscientist David Eagleman imagines an answer to that question in his fantastic little book called Some, 40 Tales of the Afterlives. In it, he paints 40 brief and varied scenarios of what the afterlife might be like, sort of Twilight Zone-y, as you'll see in a minute. They're, in fact, commentaries on our earthly lives and what they might or might not be. Here's one of those 40 tales called Circle of Friends. When you die, you feel as though there were some subtle change, but everything looks approximately the same. You get up and brush your teeth. You kiss your spouse and kids before leaving for the office. There's less traffic than normal. The rest of your building seems less full, as though it's a holiday. But everyone in your office is here, and they greet you kindly. You feel strangely popular. Everyone you run into is someone you know. At some point, it dawns on you that this is the afterlife. The world is only made up of people you've met before.
It's a small fraction of the world population, about 0.0002%, but it seems like plenty to you. It turns out that only the people you remember are here, so the woman with whom you shared a glance in the elevator may or may not be included. Your second grade teacher is here with most of the class. Your parents, your cousins, and your spectrum of friends throughout the years, all your old lovers, your boss, your grandmothers, and the waitress who served your food each day at lunch. Those you dated, those you almost dated, those you longed for. It is a blissful opportunity to spend quality time with your 1,000 connections, to renew fading ties, to catch up with those you let slip away.
It's only after several weeks of this that you begin to feel forlorn. You wonder what's different as you saunter through the vast, quiet parks with a friend or two. No strangers grace the empty park benches. No family, unknown to you, throws breadcrumbs to the ducks and makes you smile because of their laughter. As you step into the streets, you note there are no crowds, no buildings teeming with workers, no distant cities bustling, no hospitals running 24/7 with patients dying and staff brushing, no trains howling into the night with sardined passengers on their way home. Very few strangers and foreigners. You begin to consider all the things unfamiliar to you. You've never known, you realize, how to vulcanize rubber to make a tire. And now, these factories stand empty. You've never known how to fashion silicone chips from beach sand, how to launch rockets out of the atmosphere, how to pit olives or lay railroad tracks. And now, all of these industries are shut down.
The missing crowds make you lonely. You begin to complain about all the people you could be meeting, but no one listens or sympathizes with you because this is precisely what you chose when you were alive. Thank you, David. Thank you, Beverly. Without diversity, life becomes bland. Now maybe you're thinking, come on, what a bunch of liberal hogwash. I hope that's just a straw person I set up there, but maybe there's someone. There is data that indicates that diversity makes us better in all kinds of ways. CEO positions in top companies, for example, are dominated by white males, but a study by Credit Suisse cited last year in the Washington Post showed that having women in senior management correlated with strong stock market performance. Journalist Joanne Weiner wrote, "Companies that put a priority on innovation are worth more when women hold top leadership positions. These companies are $44 million more valuable on average, according to a multi-year academic study of Standard & Poor's top 1,500 firms." She cited research that indicates that Wall Street traders set prices more accurately when they work with more diverse firms. She talked about Scientific American's work, showing that scientific research is of higher quality when it's conducted by a diverse research group. Here's what she concluded. If all the viewpoints we hear come from people who are like us, we assume that we all have the same information and the same perspective. We think we have the right answer, and since we don't hear otherwise, we have no reason to think otherwise. It's these beliefs that explain why creativity and innovation are more likely to spring from diverse rather than identical groups. Now, you may not be surprised by what Joanne Weiner said at the end of her article. White men are the least likely to say they believe diversity is important. I know. In a survey of job seekers conducted in 2015, 32% of men said diversity isn't all that important. 32. Just 22% of women agreed. 10% of black respondents said diversity wasn't important, but 36% of whites said diversity wasn't important. It becomes clear that even though it's good for us to be shaken out of our ruts, to do that for one another, white Americans and plenty of others too, either don't know that or would prefer to stay in our ruts. Thank you very much. I really like Weiner's conclusion. She said diversity should be important to everyone. We work harder and prepare more thoroughly when we work with people who don't look like us because we anticipate receiving difficult questions or being challenged on our beliefs when we face someone with a different background. This preparation is painful, which may be one reason why so many people don't seem to value diversity. They have to work harder to make themselves understood. They have to consider alternatives. They might even have to change their minds. With the season of Rosh Hashanah just days away, I think the Hebrew Bible holds a parable of diversity for us. One of the foundational stories of what's called the primeval history in Genesis is the Tower of Babel. As the ancient fable goes, all the people of the world once lived in one place and shared a common language. They decided to build a tower tall enough for them to reach heaven, and then God got involved. Afraid that these people would soon become unstoppable, who knows what they would do, God destroyed their tower, made them speak different languages, and scattered them around the world, so the story tells us. This fable was written by people who needed to communicate across different cultures. The people on the other side of the mountain seem to be ready to go to war with us, and we need to talk to them, but we can't. The people who wrote this fable saw language barriers as the main problem. A curse, not a blessing. And so did the authors of the Christian Bible. In the book of Acts, as the fable written several thousand years after Babel goes, Jesus has died, has been resurrected, and has ascended. And his followers from various parts of the region, followers who spoke different languages, are left frightened and huddled in a tiny upstairs room praying. Suddenly the Holy Spirit descends on them, and some begin speaking a message of comfort from God in languages they didn't know before, so that everyone heard God's message in their own language. This is how the author wants us to hear it. So here, God has reversed the curse of Babel. God has made sure that all people can understand. in the background of both the Jewish and the Christian accounts, no matter what you think of God or no God, no matter where you are on that question, the intent of the authors is to talk about a God who longs for people to know one another across perceived differences. And all the pictures of heaven in most faiths are pictures of people from all around the world, from diverse perspectives, gathered together. And we Unitarian Universalists ask, why wait for that heaven? Our ancient religious traditions and our own hearts call us to love across divisions, to see the beauty in humanity's great diversity. Let us never allow ourselves to see diversity as a threat. We are beautiful just as we are. What joy awaits those people who can see the beauty in diversity. Amen.